Hi folks, and welcome to Tech with Troy. I apologize in advance for my voice. I've got a little bit of a frog in my throat, if you will. This video is going to be a little bit different. Normally we focus on particularly laptops that are affordable, and this holiday season, as I've been watching laptops, I haven't really seen any changes since the Black Friday prices that we saw. They actually haven't gone up much either, so you can still find a lot of the machines that we talked about over the past couple of months for the same prices. However, as I looked at that, something else has popped up that I thought might be worth discussing and suggesting to folks. And that is, when you're looking at getting, let's say, a nice mid-range laptop, which for the purpose of our channel, we would refer to as sort of the $450 price range, like the Lenovo i5 machines and the Ryzen 3000 series that we've talked about. But if you're thinking about that, something that because of price changes has come to sort of the same price range but is a lot more powerful is actually a desktop machine. So I put together sort of a hypothetical set of components that you'd need to make a good desktop machine, and I'm going to go through them one at a time. But first, let me sort of give you my reasoning for doing that. Now, if you were to do some research on the typical i5 chip that you see in those mid-range laptops we were talking about versus the chip that I'm going to propose for a desktop machine, which is the Ryzen 3400G, what you'd find out is that in terms of speed and in terms of capability, I would say that the desktop machine is going to be at least half again as good, if you will, as the laptop. Yes, it's not going to be portable, but again, if you're buying it for a kid or for yourself and the intention is to play games on it, this thing is actually a pretty darn good gaming machine. It's also a good work machine, and it's a fairly good sort of starter system that you can then add components to. One of the reasons that I decided to sort of make this video is that when somebody buys a laptop, yes, you can sometimes expand the RAM, you can sometimes expand the storage, but the other parts, you're pretty much locked in. And as we're going to talk about in just a second, with the desktop machine that I'm going to recommend, or the parts for the desktop machine, the other thing that you get is expandability. Down the road, you could expand the processor, the memory, the storage, the video card, just about anything. But let's talk about sort of the basic set of components that I would recommend for getting. And I'll put links to all these down in the show notes below. First of all, you need a processor. Now, Ryzen, AMD's new brand of CPUs, the Ryzen 3000 series is brand new, and they've gotten lots of accolades from the press and everything. One of the parts of their, quote, 3000 series, and I say, quote, 3000 because it's actually built on slightly older technology, is the Ryzen 5 3200G and the 3400G. Now, the cool thing about these is they have a built-in graphics processor. And while it's not as good as sort of a discrete card that would cost hundreds of dollars more, it's still good enough to play games. It's good enough to play most games at a fairly good level of detail. So right now, the Ryzen 5 3400G, which is a 4-core, 8-thread processor, is going for about $147. Now, if you're going to take this processor and drop it into a machine, you're going to need a motherboard to put it in. Pretty good motherboard is the MSI Micro ATX motherboard, as it's called. This is sort of a squarish, smaller than sort of the big tower systems that you've seen. We'll see. We're going to still put it in a fairly nice case because we want to have future expandability. But this is a pretty decent price, so $75 for a motherboard. Likewise, you need a case, and this case is sort of bigger than what you need. Let me go through some of the parts of it. At the back, for example, you have 4 slots. Counting it right? No, 5 slots. Sorry, I miscounted there. 5 slots that you could basically put cards that sort of have outputs out the back. If you wanted to add a video card in the future, you would put it into this slot right here on your motherboard, and it would stick out the back. But you don't need a motherboard with a you don't need a video card with the 3400G. So we're buying this basically for future expandability. Now, the other nice thing is that this thing has enough space, and the way it mounts things, let me call up this, it mounts things so that the motherboard's going to be right here on this tray, and then your power supply and your hard drives, if you have any, you can wind up putting down here. Now, we're not proposing getting any hard drives for this machine right now, but again, it'll have the expandability to be able to include them in the future if need be. So far we've talked about processor, motherboard, case. We also need a power supply. Now, for what we're running in it, we could probably go with like a 450 or a 500 watt power supply. I would actually recommend a 600 watt power supply for two reasons. Again, this idea of future expandability. If you wanted to add a fairly decent video card in the future, you could. But two, if you get a power supply that has a little bit excess capacity, the fan's not going to run as hard or as often, if you will, and so it'll make it quieter. It'll put less strain on the system. So I just recommend sort of overpowering a little bit. And even a 600 watt power supply is only going to be $56.72. We're also going to need storage, or excuse me, memory. And for memory, for a nice starter level system that you do want to do some gaming on, I'd recommend 16 gig of memory. Now this is going to be 3200 speed memory, so it'll actually work really well with that Ryzen processor. The Ryzen processor actually uses the memory to sort of help it speed itself up, I guess is the best way to put it. And this is a nice speed of memory for that. Again, and you'll notice a lot of our parts here, other than the processor, are priced right around the $75 price range, right? So the processor was 2 times 75, or about 150. The motherboard was 75. The case was a little bit less than 75. The power supply was considerably less than 75, and the RAM is around 75. And then finally, you're going to need some storage. You need something to boot off of. Silicon Power has made a pretty good name for itself in the past, I'd say past couple of years in terms of storage, but particularly SSD. Now this is an NVMe SSD. This motherboard that we proposed getting actually has a slot that will allow it to run at its full speed, and this will be a really good boot drive. Now down the road you could add a larger SSD, you could add more hard drives and so forth. So in terms of what you could get from Amazon for sort of one set of purchases, if we go back and look at this hypothetical shopping list, the SSD, the memory, the processor, the motherboard, the power supply, and the case would all total to $456.69. Now, if you're new to making computers, one thing you might not realize, or one thing you will realize if you've made a computer before, is you need one more thing, and that would be the operating system. Now, you can also buy an operating system from Amazon for around $80 for Windows 10, or, and I'll put links to both of these sites later, but there's a couple of companies online that will sell you discounted copies of Windows 10 keys. Now you'll have to download Windows 10 from the Microsoft website. It'll take a while because it's a fairly big download, and you'll need another computer to sort of put it on a storage device to get it over to your computer. But when you boot up your computer, if it finds, for instance, this Windows 10 software on a USB drive, and you take the key that you buy from these folks and type it in, then it'll install onto your computer. The point is that both of these places you can buy a Windows 10 key for around $10. So $10 plus 456, you're still talking less than $500. Maybe all in we're talking $475. So this is a pretty good alternative to buying a laptop machine, particularly if you have somebody or yourself that wants to sort of have an entry-level gaming machine that'll do a pretty decent job. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more in terms of maybe combining these parts into an actual working machine. And if you like the video and like the series, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Take care, and I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season.